Hi, my name is Noah Doherty and I work at Education Elements. I'm excited to talk today about how we can support the whole child in tomorrow's schools. This is a really big topic and we're going to focus on three key considerations. First, how do we create safe and emotionally supportive learning spaces for our students? Second, we want to recognize that SEL competencies really work best in the most rigorous learning experiences. And third, we want to design lesson activities that really encourage student voice and choice. We're going to talk about each of the challenges that surround these considerations. We're going to talk about the opportunities present, and we're really going to think holistically about how we create the kind of schools that can really support the whole child. To begin with, I want you to think about a time and place where you felt safe and emotionally supported. Maybe it was when you were learning in a classroom or a place of work or a social or community group you've been a part of. For me, I think about the very best team I've ever worked on, which is when I taught 8th grade social studies. We were all newer teachers, but very quickly we developed a deep level of trust and understanding between us. We could really see the unique value that each of us brought to the team, and we leaned on those strengths in our work. This is also the first time when I wasn't afraid to fail in front of my colleagues. I could have a lesson that didn't go well, or I could have a student relationship that needed to improve, and I was never worried about hiding that from my team. Because one, I knew they would never sidestep that issue, and two, I knew they would always be there to support me. I grew so much when I was on that team, and it was because that space was so supportive and safe. And I've often thought about that team as I moved to a different school and different places of work. I thought about that team when I wanted to make my classroom a safe space for students to share writing feedback with one another. I've thought about that team when I've worked with colleagues on a new project, especially when we run into an unforeseen challenge. This is why we start with self-reflection when thinking about creating safe and emotionally supportive spaces. Our own experiences can illustrate the power and potential of those spaces. When our personal journey reinforces the why behind this consideration, it is all the more powerful. I want you to take time to really reflect about a time and place where you felt safe and emotionally supported. What was the context of that place? How did it empower you? How have you tried to recreate that kind of space for others? What was the impact of that space for you? What might be the impact of that space for students? A very quick note. The inverse of this self-reflection question can provide a helpful contrast. When we think about safe and emotionally supportive spaces, we can compare them to spaces that have felt judgmental or unsupportive, tense, or uncaring. Now, while that contrast can be helpful, we shouldn't focus on the inverse of it. Creating a safe and supportive space isn't about the absence of something. It's about the very intentional inclusion of something. It's not enough to say, I won't be judgmental in this space. We have to intentionally include opportunities for self-reflection, for the celebration of mistakes, to really create that kind of safe and supportive space. The Aspen Institute is a policy and think tank that created the National Commission on Social, Emotional, and Academic Development. In 2019, they released their report, From a Nation at Risk to a Nation of Hope. In that report, they write, "It is a mistake to view social and emotional learning as a soft approach to education. Quite the opposite. An emphasis on these capacities is not the sacrifice of rigor, it is the source of rigor." When we think about SEL competencies as separate from academic standards, we create the risk that we'll prioritize one over the other. Instead, we must shift our approach to recognize the deeply symbiotic relationship between these two. If we're to develop competencies such as self-awareness or responsible decision-making, we have to engage students in learning experiences that allow them to apply, analyze, and practice those skills. You can't teach responsible decision-making by simply defining it at the remember level. However, you can ask students to apply that practice. They can analyze the complex considerations involved in responsible decision-making, and they can reflect on their own decisions and the decisions of others in an effort to evaluate how responsible they were. Let's imagine a social studies classroom where we use something like the Treaty of Versailles that ended World War I as an opportunity to evaluate the decisions made by world leaders. Was it a responsible decision to require Germany to accept full responsibility for the war and pay massive reparations to the Allied powers? This question requires students to really think about how they define responsibility for themselves. They have to consider the competing responsibilities the world leaders felt and the impact of that decision. This is just one way that a rigorous activity can authentically involve SEL competencies. Prioritizing SEL competencies in the classroom goes hand in hand with increasing the rigor of those same classrooms. We must adjust our language to name this truth and create systems and expectations that help educators plan for both when designing learning experiences. Thinking about the school of tomorrow requires us to consider the jobs of tomorrow. And these jobs require a different set of skills than the ones we've traditionally prepared students to develop. The global management consulting company McKinsey published a discussion paper about the future of work titled Skill Shift: Automation and the Future of the Workplace. In their analysis of the skills that employers will look for, they found that between 2016 and 2030, demand for social and emotional skills will grow across all industries by 26%. Addressing the needs of the whole child isn't just helpful today, it is setting our students up for success in the workplace tomorrow. Why are social and emotional skills increasing in importance? Primarily, it's because of the increased importance of advanced technologies like automation and artificial intelligence. As automation expands and artificial intelligence continues to improve, social and emotional skills will become even more important. And this is because these are the skills that we simply cannot program into a computer. While machines may be taking some of our jobs, they're also making the most human part of them more important than ever. What can we as educators do to prepare our students for the jobs of tomorrow? We can begin by giving our students greater voice and choice in their work, allowing students to have more say and control over how they practice their work and how they demonstrate mastery creates the space to build critical SEL competencies. Voice and choice is a simple shift in our tactics and planning that can have an outsized impact on our students. Thanks for taking some time to think about the innovative ways we can support the whole child. Follow us on Twitter at edelements.com to access more resources and ideas.